Dr. Ji-won stepped out of the research rover and felt the ground under her boots. The surface of Cayenne 7 was hard and smooth like crystal. It made a crunching sound when she walked on it. She had been living and working on this planet for 6 months now. Her job was to study everything about this world before more humans came to live here and build more buildings and cities. The air smelled strange. It was not like Earth air. It was thick and had a green color to it, like being inside a cloud. The twin suns above made everything bright and warm. Ji-won wore a special suit that helped her stay cool in the heat. On her back, she carried a big backpack filled with tools and equipment. She had soil samples that she had dug from the ground, machines that measured the air, and notebooks where she wrote down what she saw and learned. Ji-won walked slowly across the crystal ground toward the lower valley. This was the place where she had found the most interesting plants and creatures. She did not know that today would be different from all the other days. She did not know that today would change everything. Then her earpiece made a loud sound. It was a warning from the colony. The voice that came through was worried and fast. Ji-won stopped walking. Something was wrong. Something was coming. Through the green mist that hung low in the valley, she saw shadows moving. Big shadows. Very big shadows. These were the Kale. Humans had seen them only from far away before. No human had ever come this close to them and lived to talk about it. Ji-won's hand moved toward the gun at her side. It was a tranquilizer gun. Not a weapon that killed. But as she watched the shadows move, something made her stop. She did not pull out the gun. Something in the way the creatures moved told her they were not hunting. They were looking for something. They were curious. More mist cleared away, and Ji-won could see them clearly now. There were 4 of them. 3 were very large, and 1 was smaller. The Kale had bodies covered in scales that reflected light like metal and glass mixed together. The scales were different colors. The big ones had shiny gold and purple scales that seemed to glow. The small one, the young one, had dull gold scales that did not shine as much. The largest Kale, which Ji-won guessed was the leader, stopped and smelled the air. It had many holes and openings on its face that were not like human noses. It was sniffing in a way that seemed very powerful, as if it could smell things from far, far away. The baby Kale, which Ji-won now thought of as a cub because it looked young and small compared to the others, stayed close to the one that looked like its mother. But the cub's big dark eyes were looking at only one thing. They were looking at Ji-won's backpack. Ji-won did not move. She was breathing slowly and carefully. She knew that any fast movement might make these creatures scared or angry. She also knew that the colony was probably watching her right now with cameras and guns pointed at her. If anything went wrong, they would shoot. But something inside her made her want to stay calm and see what would happen. The cub took a step forward, then another step, and another. Its mother made a sound, a low rumbling noise, like thunder from far away. But it did not sound like a warning to attack. It sounded more like a warning to be careful. The cub kept walking toward Ji-won anyway. Ji-won watched as the creature came closer and closer. The cub was enormous. It was taller than a human, maybe 2 meters tall. But it moved, in a careful way. It did not move like a hunter attacking food. It moved like something new, trying to figure out what something else was. The cub stopped 2 meters away from Ji-won. It was now close enough to hurt her if it wanted to. Close enough to kill her easily, with its big claws and sharp teeth. But instead, the cub's head tilted to one side. It was thinking about something. It was studying Ji-won like she was the most interesting thing it had ever seen. Then the cub reached out one massive clawed hand. Ji-won's heart almost stopped. But the cub did not swipe at her. The claws did not try to hurt her. Instead, the claws gently touched the fabric of her backpack. The cub was touching the backpack very gently, the way someone might touch something they were afraid of breaking. Ji-won's heart was beating very fast in her chest. Her whole body wanted to run away. But something else inside her wanted to stay. Something wanted to see what happened next. Humans and Kale had been living on this planet without really knowing each other for over a year. There had been no real contact. Now this moment was happening. This strange, scary, beautiful moment. Ji-won did not move. She let the cub touch her backpack. She did not try to move away or protect her equipment. The cub made a noise. It was a high chirping sound, different from the rumbling sound the adults made. The cub looked directly at Ji-won's face for the first time. Their eyes met. The cub's eyes were huge and dark like pools of deep water. Ji-won felt something pass between them in that moment. It was hard to explain. Ji-won. It was like they both understood that the other one was not a threat. It was like they both understood that they were both just curious about the world and about each other. The leader, Kyle, and the other adults stood very still. They were watching. Ji-won knew they could kill her if they wanted to, but they did not move forward. They were waiting to see what would happen next. Ji-won took a very slow breath. She spoke in a voice that was soft and quiet, like she was talking to someone she did not want to scare. "It is just equipment," she said. "Nothing to hurt you." The cub's ears, which looked like large triangles on the sides of its head, turned toward her voice. It listened to her words. The cub probably could not understand the meaning of the words. It could not speak the human language. But something in Ji-won's voice seemed to reach across the gap between their two kinds. The cub looked at her backpack again. Then it looked back at her face. Then it looked at the adults behind it, as if asking them for permission to do something. The mother made a different sound this time. Longer and slower. It did not sound like a warning. It sounded almost like agreement. The cub turned back to Ji-won. In that moment, on that strange alien world under two suns, with green mist all around them, something new began. Something that would change the future for both humans and Kale forever. The cub reached out again to touch the backpack, and Ji-won stood perfectly still, letting a predator explore the strange thing on her back, not understanding that this simple moment of curiosity would become the first step toward peace. Ji-won knew she was breaking the rules. She knew that the colony would be very angry with her. She knew that the military commander would probably want to punish her. But she also knew that she had to go back. For 3 days, Ji-won returned to the same place in the valley. She did this without telling anyone. It was against the safety rules. It was against the colony rules. It went against everything that the military and the government told people to do. But something inside Ji-won made her go back. She needed to know if the cub would be there. She needed to know if that strange moment had been real or if she had imagined it. The first time she went back, her hands were shaking as she walked. The green mist was thicker that day, and she could barely see more than a few meters ahead. Her heart jumped when she saw shapes moving in the fog. But when the shapes came closer, she could see it was the same pack. The cub was there too. And when it saw her, it made that same chirping sound. The cub came right to her without waiting. It touched her backpack immediately, like it was saying hello to an old friend. Ji-won felt relief and happiness flood through her body. The cub remembered her. The creature had not forgotten. The second time Ji-won visited, she brought something new. She carried special food blocks that were made from nutrients and proteins. These were the things she ate when she was out in the field doing her work. They did not taste good to humans, but they had everything the human body needed to stay healthy. Ji-won did not know if the Kale would like them, but she wanted to try. When the cub came near, Ji-won slowly opened her backpack. She moved very slowly and carefully, so the cub would not be scared. Then she took out one of the nutrient blocks. It was brown and hard and looked not very appetizing at all. She held it out in her open hand. The cub's nostrils opened wide. It sniffed and sniffed at the block, working very hard to understand what this thing was. The smell must have been strange and new to the creature. The cub looked back at Ji-won's face, like it was asking her if this was safe to eat. The alpha female, the mother of the pack, was watching from a distance. Her big eyes tracked every movement. Ji-won understood what was happening. The mother was testing her. She was seeing if this human would give poison to the young one or if this was some kind of ritual that meant something good. The cub took the nutrient block and put it in its mouth. Ji-won watched as the creature chewed it. Then the cub made a face. It was a very funny face. The cub's mouth opened and closed and twisted like it had just tasted something awful. Without ceremony or shyness, the cub spat out the nutrient block and let it fall to the ground. Ji-won almost laughed out loud. It was so clear that the cub thought the food was terrible. The cub looked at her like it was saying, "Why would you eat this?" But then something unexpected happened. The cub did not walk away. Instead, the juvenile predator reached out toward Ji-won's backpack again. This time, it was not just touching it gently. This time, the cub took the shoulder strap between its massive teeth. Very carefully, with its sharp claws, the kale cub grabbed hold of the backpack and pulled. Ji-won understood what the cub wanted immediately. The creature wanted to carry the backpack. But this was more than just wanting to hold something. This was the cub asking for responsibility. This was the cub asking to be trusted with something important. Ji-won felt tears come to her eyes. She had not expected this. She slowly took off the backpack and held it out toward the cub. The cub grabbed it with its claws, holding the straps carefully the way Ji-won had shown by example. The young Kael looked at the weight of the pack in its claws. It looked at Ji-won's face, like it was making sure she was really giving this to it. "I trust you," Ji-won said in a soft voice. "It is heavy, but I know you can carry it. I trust you to keep it safe." The cub stood up taller. Its chest seemed to puff out with pride. It had been given something important. It had been given responsibility. The young predator walked in a small circle, showing the rest of its family what it held. It was like a child showing off a prize or a gift that someone had given it. The mother made that rumbling sound again. But this time, Ji-won was starting to understand that it was not a warning sound or an angry sound. It sounded almost like laughter, like the mother was amused and happy about what her child was doing. For 2 hours, the cub carried the backpack. Ji-won sat on a rock and watched. She watched as the cub walked around, exploring the area with the pack on its back. She watched as the other young KL came to look at what the cub had. She watched as the cub was very careful not to let the pack drag on the ground or get dirty. When the cub finally came back to her, the backpack was completely unharmed. Every item was exactly where Ji-won had left it. Nothing had been broken. Nothing had been damaged. The cub had treated the pack like it was made of glass, like it was the most precious thing in the world. Ji-won took the backpack back, and the cub made that chirping sound again. It sounded sad, like the cub was sad that it had to give up the responsibility. But Ji-won knew that the cub would understand. Ji-won knew that the cub had learned something important. In that moment, Ji-won realized what had really happened. The cub was learning that when someone trusts you with something, you have to take care of it. You have to protect it. You have to make sure nothing bad happens to it because you promised. This was bigger than a human playing with a predator cub. This was about something that lived in the hearts of all creatures. This was about trust. This was about the ability to care for something that was not your own. This was about responsibility. Ji-won walked back to the colony that night with her backpack on her shoulders and hope in her heart. She knew that she had discovered something important. She knew that the Kael were not just animals. They understood things. They could learn things. And the cub had shown her all of this without any words being spoken. Just through the simple act of carrying something that did not belong to it, carrying it safely, and returning it unharmed. Dr. Hae-jun found out about Ji-won's secret visits to the valley. He discovered this by watching the drone footage. These were video recordings from small flying cameras that watched the area from above. When Hae-jun saw the videos of the cub carrying the backpack, he did not get angry. Instead, he became very quiet and thoughtful. Hae-jun was the chief scientific officer of the colony. He was the person in charge of all the science and research that happened there. He had studied many planets and many creatures. He was smart, and he was curious about everything. When he saw the footage, he called G1 to his office. G1 was nervous when she walked into his office. She thought he would tell her that she had done something wrong. She thought he would tell her that she could not go to the valley anymore. But Hae-jun did something different. He showed her the footage, and then he spoke quietly. "You have established a social bond," he said, watching the video of the cub carefully carrying the backpack across the crystal ground. "The Kale are highly intelligent creatures. I have suspected this for a long time, but I could never prove it. You have shown me the proof." Ji-won felt confused. She did not understand what Hae-jun was saying. "The Kale understand hierarchy," Hae-jun continued. "That means they understand that some creatures are stronger or weaker than others. They understand trust. That means they can rely on each other and believe that another creature will not hurt them. And now, you have shown me that they also understand the concept of stewardship. That means they understand caring for something that belongs to someone else." Ji-won realized what Hae-jun was saying. He was saying that the cub had shown real intelligence, real understanding, real emotions. "What happens now?" Ji-won asked quietly. Hae-jun sat back in his chair and thought for a moment. Then he made a decision. "We tell the council," he said. "But we do this carefully. The council will want to continue your research officially. They will give us resources and equipment. But we must also prepare for resistance. Some people in the colony do not want to believe that the Kale are intelligent. Some people want to treat this planet like a place to take resources from, not a place to share with another species." The council was a group of leaders who made important decisions for the colony. They included the governor, military officers, scientists, and other important people. When Hae-jun and Ji-won presented their findings to the council, the room became very quiet. Ji-won showed videos and photographs. She explained how the cub had learned to be careful with the backpack. She explained how the cub had taught this behavior to other young KL. Hae-jun presented measurements and scientific data. He showed how the Kale had complex social structures. He showed evidence that they communicated with each other in sophisticated ways. Then a military officer named Commander Tae-oh stood up. He was a tall man, with a hard face and cold eyes. He did not believe what they were saying. "These are just animals," Tae-oh said loudly. "Animals can learn to do tricks. That does not mean they are intelligent, or that we should treat them like equals. The KL are predators. They are dangerous. They kill things. We should not trust them." The governor, an older woman named Kwan, listened to both sides. She was thoughtful and careful. She did not make quick decisions. "What you are saying," Governor Kwan said to Ji-won, "is that we may have made contact with an intelligent species. Is that correct?" "Yes," Ji-won said. "The Kale show signs of abstract thinking. They show signs of emotional intelligence. They can learn complex ideas. They can teach what they learn to other members of their species." "And if this is true," another council member asked, "what does that mean for our colony?" Hae-jun answered this question. "It means we must change how we interact with them. We cannot treat them as obstacles or resources to be removed. The Accord of Intelligent Species, which was written by the Earth government, says that we must respect any species that shows signs of real intelligence and real consciousness." Commander Tae-oh was not happy about this. He argued that the Kale were a threat. He argued that their territory contained rare minerals that the colony needed. He argued that protecting the Kale would prevent the colony from growing and becoming strong. But more and more council members were convinced by what Ji-won and Hae-jun had shown them. Dr. Min Seo, who was the colony's medical officer, presented evidence about the Kale's brain size and structure. She showed that their brains were complex, almost as complex as human brains. Finally, Governor Kwan made a decision. "We will establish official research protocols," she announced. Dr. Ji-won will be the lead researcher and official liaison officer. She will continue to study the Kale and work to establish peaceful contact. We will also protect the valley, where this initial contact has happened. The KL pack that Dr. G1 has been working with will be protected under provisional status. No hunting, no resource extraction, no military action will be taken against them. While we learn more, Commander Teo stormed out of the council room. He was angry and unhappy, but he was outvoted. The decision had been made. That evening, G1 returned to the valley alone. When the cub saw her, it ran to her immediately. The young kale made its chirping sound and touched her face with its claws, but very gently. G1 knelt down and wrapped her arms around the cub's neck as best she could. "You taught us something important," she whispered into the cub's scaled shoulder. "You showed us that responsibility is not just a human idea. It is something that lives in all creatures that have heart and mind. You showed us that creatures can care for each other across the space between their kinds." The cub made a sound that seemed almost like purring. It nuzzled G1's hair with its snout. The pack watched from a distance, and in their eyes, G1 could see something new. She could see that they understood. They understood that something had changed. Something peaceful and good had changed. Over the next months, G1 worked with Heijun and a small team of scientists to study the KL more closely. They brought special equipment to the valley. They brought cameras that could see in different types of light. They brought machines that could record sounds and analyze them. They brought computers that could store information and help them understand patterns. The cub, which G1 had privately named Kier in her personal journals, became the center of their study. Kier was willing to interact with the human researchers. Kier was willing to learn and to teach. Through careful observation and patient work, the scientists began to understand the KL in deeper ways. They discovered that the KL had at least 40 different vocalizations, different sounds they made to communicate. Some sounds meant danger. Some sounds meant food. Some sounds meant that they wanted to play or rest or move to a new location. It was a real language, not just animal noises. They discovered that the KL had complex family structures. There were mothers and fathers and children and grandparents. There were roles that different members of the pack played. Some KL were hunters. Some were caretakers of the young. Some were guardians who protected the group from danger. They discovered that the KL made tools. They found stones that the KL had shaped and sharpened to cut plants and process food. They found evidence that the KL made shelters to live in during storms. They even found markings on rocks that seemed to have no purpose except decoration or possibly meaning. Most importantly, they discovered what Heijun called behavioral transmission. This meant that the KL did not just learn things. They taught things to each other. Kier was teaching other young KL how to interact with humans. Kier was showing them how to be gentle. Kier was showing them that these small bipedal creatures were not prey or threats. One day, Heijun called G1 to his office. He had prepared a report, a long document with pictures and data and analysis. The report had taken him many weeks to write. "I am recommending to the council," Heijun said, "that we officially declare the kale a sentient species, not just intelligent, but sentient. Sentient means that they are aware of themselves. They have feelings, they have thoughts, they have a sense of right and wrong." "What makes you say that?" G1 asked. "Look at this," Heijun said, pointing to his computer screen. The screen showed a video of Kier with a young KL cub that was smaller than Kier. The video showed Kier teaching the smaller cub how to handle objects carefully. It showed Kier stopping the cub if the cub was being too rough. It showed Kier using body language and sounds to show the younger cub that some things were important and needed to be treated with care. "That is not just learning," Heijun said. "That is teaching. That is patience. That is compassion. That is the transfer of values from one generation to the next. That is culture. Only sentient beings have culture." G1 watched the video, and tears came to her eyes. She was seeing something she had always known in her heart but could never explain in scientific words. She was seeing that the kale had hearts and minds. They had souls. Heijun presented his report to Governor Quan and the council. He presented his findings to the military. He presented scientific evidence that could not be argued with or dismissed. The evidence was too strong. The data was too clear. But not everyone was happy about this news. Commander Teo called for an emergency military council. He argued that if the Kale were declared sentient, then they would have legal rights. They would have protection under interplanetary law. They would have to be treated as an independent nation, not as animals or obstacles. This is unacceptable, Teo said. His face was red with anger. We came to this planet to build a new home for humanity. The Kyle territory contains rare minerals that we need. If we grant them sentience, we will never be able to access those resources. The Council's decision will prevent this colony from growing and prospering. Governor Quan listened to his argument. She was sympathetic to his concerns about the colony's future. But she was also a person who believed in doing what was right and just. If the Kale are sentient, Governor Quan said slowly, then they are not resources. They are people. We cannot mine their territory for minerals any more than we could mine a human city for the same reason. It would be wrong. It would be evil. Then we are doomed. Teo said bitterly. We will never expand. We will never prosper. No, Governor Quan said. We will expand differently. We will grow by working with the Kale, not against them. We will establish trade. We will establish friendship. We will become stronger through cooperation, not through dominance. Commander Teo stood up and stormed out of the council room. Everyone knew that he was angry and that he disagreed with the governor's decision. But even he could see that the majority of the council agreed with Quan. The vote was taken. The decision was official. The KL were recognized as a sentient species. That night, Ji-won went to the valley to tell Kier the news, even though the cub could not understand words. She sat beside the young Kale and stroked its scaled head gently. You are official now, Ji-won whispered. The humans have decided that you are not animals. You are people. You have rights. You have protection. You have value and meaning, not because we say so, but because you always had it. We just finally understood. Kier made a soft chirping sound and pressed its head against Ji-won's chest. The two creatures sat together under the alien sky, with two suns setting and the stars beginning to appear. Around them, the rest of the KL pack settled down to sleep, and for the first time since humans had arrived on Cayenne 7, there was peace between the two species. There was recognition. There was the beginning of real understanding between two different kinds of people. 6 months after the council's decision, the valley had changed dramatically. It looked nothing like it had before. Where there was once only the wild landscape of the alien planet, there were now buildings. But these buildings were different from what might have been expected. They were built with careful attention to not disturbing the Kale's natural environment. The buildings had open sides. They had spaces where the Kale could move freely. The structure in the center of this settlement was the diplomatic outpost. This was a building designed for communication and learning between the two species. It had rooms where scientists worked. It had rooms where young Kale and young humans could learn together. It had areas where translation devices worked to help bridge the gap between the two very different languages. At the heart of this new settlement stood Kier. The young Kale had grown much larger in the 6 months since G1 had first made contact. Kier's scales had turned the shiny gold and purple colors of a mature Kale. But despite the physical growth, Kier still maintained the gentle nature that had first made contact with G1 possible. Kier had become a bridge between the two species. When new Kale arrived from distant territories, they would first encounter Kier. The young Kale would demonstrate how to interact with humans. Kier would show that humans did not bite or attack. Kier would show that humans made interesting objects and had strange behaviors, but none of these things were dangerous. Kier would introduce the visitors to the humans who lived at the outpost. And gradually, the new Kale would understand that these bipedal creatures were not prey or threats, but potential allies. More remarkably, the Alpha Pack began sending other juveniles to learn from Kier. Young KL would arrive at the outpost boundaries, curious and cautious. They would watch from a distance as Kier interacted with G1 and the other human researchers. They would observe how Kier handled delicate equipment without breaking it. They would see how Kier worked together with humans on tasks that required cooperation. Over time, these young KL would venture closer. They would make sounds at the humans, testing their reactions. Some humans would respond with gentle tones and slow movements. Gradually, the young KL would learn. They would learn that responsibility was rewarded. They would learn that trust could be given and received. They would learn that there was more to the world than what they had known before. One morning, Dr. Heijun pulled up data on his computer from the monitoring stations that had been placed throughout the valley and beyond. He called G1 to come look at the information. The Kale's territorial conflicts have decreased by 47%, he said, pointing at graphs that showed various types of data. In the 3 months before we established formal contact, we recorded numerous aggressive encounters between different Kale packs. We detected sounds of fighting. We detected physical confrontations. But now, after 6 months of coordinated contact through Kier and the other young KL, the number of these conflicts has dropped dramatically. Why would that happen? Ji-won asked, even though she had a good idea of the answer. We have been analyzing the communication patterns. A scientist named Dr. Min Seo explained. She was the colony's medical officer who had become deeply involved in the research project. The Kale have developed new ways of communicating. They use some of the same hand signals and body language that Kier learned from watching humans. Our xenolinguist believes they are using contact protocols that we developed with Kier to resolve disputes peacefully instead of through violence. Ji-won felt a sense of wonder and pride flood through her. She had not tried to teach the Kyle anything about peace or cooperation. All she had done was establish a relationship based on trust and responsibility with one young creature. And that one relationship had rippled outward to create change in an entire civilization. We should document this, Ji-won said. We should show the council what is happening. Over the next week, the scientists compiled reports and videos. They documented every peaceful negotiation between Kale packs. They showed evidence of reduced violence. They showed that other packs were adopting Kier's methods of gentle handling and careful interaction. More importantly, they showed something that no one had expected. The Kale were making changes to their own society based on what they had learned from contact with humans. They were developing their own version of responsibility training for young Kale. They were teaching concepts of peace and cooperation. They were choosing to settle disputes through communication instead of violence. Governor Kwan called an emergency council meeting to discuss these findings. When she saw the evidence, she made a decision. We are ready for formal diplomatic relations, she announced. I will propose an official meeting between human leadership and Kale leadership. We will attempt to establish a formal agreement of peaceful coexistence. Commander Teo was still present at these meetings, though his influence had diminished. He tried once more to argue against cooperation with the Kale. But even he could see that this was working. Even he could see that the Kale were not mindless animals but thinking beings who were capable of learning and growing and choosing a better path. This is not about weakness, Governor Kwan said to Teo, though it seemed like she was also saying it to everyone in the room. This is about strength, a species that can choose peace over conflict, that can learn from another species, that can transform its own culture based on new understanding. That is the strongest kind of species. That is what we should aspire to be. 3 weeks later, the formal meeting took place. The Kale elders, led by an ancient female Kale, whose scales had faded to pale gold with age, came to the diplomatic outpost. Ji-won served as translator, using devices and understanding that had been developed over months of work. The agreement that was negotiated was the first of its kind in human history. It was not about conquest or domination. It was not about one species controlling another. It was about two different kinds of people recognizing each other's rights and working together for mutual benefit. Kier stood beside Jiwon throughout the entire process. The young Kale had helped make this moment possible. Through patience and gentleness, through the simple willingness to carry another creature's burden and prove that responsibility was worth the effort. Kier had changed the course of two entire civilizations,